Welcome to the Polite Conversations podcast, where every episode is focused on civility, decorum, and good manners. And I'm your lovable, non-controversial host, Ina. If you know me, you know I definitely don't like to ruffle any feathers at all. Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to my third and final part of this Kirk Holy War series. And thank goodness, because I don't think I could bear immersing myself in any more of this Christo-fascist bullshit. It almost makes me miss doing a good Duncan on secular fasci fucks. Almost. And as always, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting it via Patreon, because the extended episodes of this series are pretty interesting, if I may say so myself, and relevant to the clownishly fasci times we are living through in this wild world. A lot of hard work went into making this series of episodes. Plus, you get the added benefit of supporting a small Canadian podcast that isn't hosted by a bro for a change. And it makes IDW fans cry whenever you do. It's a pretty tough time to be a small leftist podcast, so if you like helping these types of projects survive the, enshittification of every single app, then please consider helping make that happen. I can only do this work because of the wonderful patrons who allow me to. And if you can't support via Patreon, please consider leaving a review and sharing the work. That too helps give the show a boost and helps others find it. And whenever I get a bunch of reviews, I unlock more episodes on the public feed. So please leave reviews. Good ones even, because the angry Sam Harris fans certainly don't hesitate to. Over on the premium Patreon tiers, I've got an upcoming bonus episode with comedian Andy Kindler from Bob's Burgers about the Riyadh Comedy Festival. So if you'd like to hear mine and Andy's takes on that, go sign up on the premium tiers. And in the pipeline, I've also got my now quite delayed AMA, which I put on hold because of this Kirk series, and also a fun and fascinating conversation with a former friend and collaborator of Sam Harris. So it's a pretty good time to sign up. Lots of interesting stuff coming up. All right, let's begin then. Generally, it's been a very eventful time since my last episode. A bunch of GOP Nazi stories keep coming out. What a strange coincidence, eh? Oh, and a Democrat Nazi tattoo story also. Jesus. Just a lot of this stuff in American politics right now. But, on a more positive note, the No Kings protests in the U.S., the turnout for that seemed amazing. Like around 7 million people across the country came out of here. I think that's fantastic. I just hope that this momentum keeps up and is actually paired with a more specific demand. I love the inflatable costumes and the fun, absurd atmosphere of it all, the reclaiming of the frog. It's all great, but I do wish that these were more universally accepted as protests opposing all the fascism, the slaughter the U.S. is enabling abroad, minority rights at home, as well as the general fuck Trump message. If people could unify all these causes, the numbers would be unreal, I think. And it really is all super connected. The day more people understand that is when they'll become an unstoppable force. And definitely these sorts of numbers make them nervous. There's a reason that Trump is posting AI slop of himself dumping poop all over his own country's citizens. Such a presidential thing to do. Can you imagine any other world leader getting away with this shit? Oh, it's nuts. He's also bulldozing parts of the White House. The symbolism is really something in those photos. Whew, it's bleak. And It's being reported that the Kirk Memorial cost U.S. taxpayers $2.6 million in security costs. If I was American, I'd be very pissed, especially considering all the cuts the U.S. government has made to everything. And this is the kind of stuff they're spending money on? And of course, people continue to be fired over Kirk. Foreigners have had their visas revoked. And the extreme glorification, while it's toned down over time a lot, it still continues though. The free speech hypocrisy still continues too. And in this episode, you'll hear me go over that hypocrisy in quite a bit of detail. Now, of course, I know that these hypocrites do not care about contradicting themselves. Hypocrisy shaming them certainly doesn't work. But I still think it's important to talk about just how shameless and incoherent they are, so that others around them who may not be so deep in the cult can see the extent of it, and at least centrists, right? May they constantly have their little centrist noses rubbed in the fact that they always fall for the right's bad faith free speech bullshit, when all they ever wanted to do was use slurs and demonize the left. The second these ghouls have power, they are very aggressively anti-free speech because they never meant any of it. Never, ever let the centrists forget how they legitimized their grievances and opened the door to usher these complete lunatics into power. So, yeah, I still think there's some value to putting the MAGA hypocrisy on display and not letting the Harper's letter types forget it, especially when some of them have also participated in the Kirk whitewashing and downplaying. And you know, many of these idiots lionizing Kirk are just simply not dealing with the content of what he said at all, and who he actually is. They just like to talk about how often he debated and had conversations. They don't contextualize that those conversations were with college kids, clipped and used to generate outrage against the left, against minorities. They don't like to talk about what the content of those conversations was at all. And they don't know how to deal when people bring up his actual views. I found this segment on CNN quite illuminating, where the host grilled Ilhan Omar harder for sharing a critical tweet about Kirk than anyone has been grilled on mainstream media for saying nice, sanitizing things about a white supremacist like Kirk. The creator who clipped this, Xavier Conley, has a good explainer that follows afterwards too.
There was a town hall that you had 6 days ago. You called Kirk a quote, hateful man, and you had reposted a video that I'm sure you've taken criticism for. It's a video that called him a reprehensible human being and said, Kirk was Dr. Frankenstein and his monster shot him through the neck. Why repost that video?
Because there were a lot of things in the video that I did agree with. Obviously, we share videos. We don't have to agree with every single word. But I do believe he was a reprehensible, hateful man. Like, that is my view of the words that he has said about every single identity that I belong to. He didn't believe that we should have equal access to anything. He also just didn't even believe I could be smart enough. I could have thoughts that could be equal to a white man. Where are we missing this conversation about who this man was and the things that he said? Do you not find that reprehensible, Caitlin?
Well, of course I don't.
Do you think
I don't subscribe to that? But
do you think I don't have the brain processing power like you or a white man?
Well, of course not. I think it's very clear here that I'm not sharing his views, and I don't
say that would be reprehensible views?
I think the argument that was being made.
No, but I'm asking
what we have heard.
What I'm asking you is, would you say that?
I understand what you're asking me.
But you're asking me, how could I find him reprehensible? Like, that is reprehensible. You said it is reprehensible yourself. That is vile, it's reprehensible, and it is hate.
My eyes are really being opened up to people who I considered progressive or liberal or whatnot, you know. That reporter, she was always the one that would stand up to Trump's press secretary and question Trump to his face. She always seemed like the hard line, you know, like not taking any nonsense or bullshit sort of person. And I want you to notice how she is. I haven't seen this level of questioning levied against people who are defending and trying to rewrite Charlie Kirk's legacy. They are going this hard against people who will not be moved in remembering who Charlie Kirk actually was. They have more energy and more passion to go against anyone that won't bend the knee to this whitewashing of Charlie Kirk's legacy. I have not seen one singular reporter give this level of energy and reporting and questioning, interrogation to anyone that is worshiping Charlie Kirk. Essentially telling Miss Omar that, don't you think it's a little rude to say these things about Charlie Kirk after he's dead and gone? It's so bizarre. It's so bizarre. They didn't even have this energy for the things that Charlie Kirk was saying when he was alive. Now they are all defending him. White supremacy is a hell of a thing.
Of course, in response to her principled stance, the right has continued to smear her and call for her deportation, make AI slop of her dressed in a prison uniform. But think about what is being asked of a black Muslim woman here by pretty much everyone, not just the right. It's that she submit and say a man who made it his life's mission to spread hatred about black people, about Muslims, about women, who put people like her in danger. She is being asked to step back in line and just accept that he, a white supremacist, be honored unchallenged. It's vile, and that's a message that is being sent to all minorities, that one racist matters far more than countless minorities who experience violence. This one racist deserves all these standing ovations, statues, and his face on the money even. They're acting like the racism was some obscure side story in his life. No, that was the work. That is his legacy. And that kind of person is still being honored widely in our societies. That's who the people in power wish to celebrate as they ignore and attack on the rights and safety of the vulnerable and as they facilitate a genocide. All minorities have been receiving this message loud and clear. We have not, in fact, moved on from the era of the West's violent colonial projects, nor the era of them erecting statues to commemorate white supremacists. We may have once thought that these things were mostly behind us, but that illusion has been completely shattered, and the social contract has been broken. Something has cracked and shattered along racial lines, unfortunately. It's been too much. It doesn't feel safe right now as a person of color. It's just not enough for white people to be quietly non-racist or non-fascist. It's certainly not a good look to make excuses for a Nazi tattoo. I mean, yeah, like now is the time for as many people as possible to use their privilege to speak out against all this stuff while people are being abducted off the streets in the US, while a white supremacist is being memorialized, while a colonial genocide rages on, despite claims of a ceasefire. And all while our leaders, even the supposedly liberal ones, lean further and further right. While Nazi stories leak out about people in politics across the political spectrum. It's an incredibly terrifying time for non-white people, Muslim people, trans people, and other minorities, and the levels of dehumanization made possible through white supremacist ideology are a threat to us all, a threat to all the progress we thought we made. And while there are so many brilliant, incredible people who are clearly putting their bodies on the line for justice, people of all walks of life and all backgrounds, including people who are white, like Greta Thunberg, what an incredible person she is, and so many others like her too. And of course, there are also plenty of awful people of color giving cover to Israel's genocide and supporting Charlie Kirk or Trump. I saw Kash Patel post a Happy Diwali tweet, and then he got mauled by racists on Twitter, telling him to go back where he came from. This is exactly what he signed up for. But, despite all that, we can't deny that the major through line here is that white supremacy is a racial thing, and it is supported or opposed generally along racial lines. Anti-immigrant sentiment is a product of that too, and the recent increasing calls for ethnically cleansing Western countries are about that. The colonial genocide we're seeing is also not unrelated to that. And while we have many exceptions and wonderful folks, like the many who listen to this show, I'm sure, who stand in solidarity, who oppose genocide vocally, we can't deny that there is now a huge crack along racial lines forming, to an extent that I honestly have never ever personally seen or experienced in my life before. And it freaks me the fuck out. I cannot look at many of the friends I've had for like a decade or more in the same way, because I've at best seen them remain silent on genocide and the rise in fascism, and if they oppose the fascism, it's selectively, just like against Trump, and not the broader picture, that was enabled by Democrats and their liberal counterparts in Western countries, and that just will not do anymore. I cannot respect that. And at worst, I've seen them post support for Israel or Charlie Kirk even. Like, I am sickened by everyone around me who isn't completely horrified by all the fashy shit that's happening in the world right now, not just their own doorstep. And it just so happens that the people around me who are speaking out about injustice consistently right now, for the past couple of years, are mostly non-white. I hate noticing that, but that's what I see when I look around at the people I know in real life. And it's painful and scary. The world has changed for me so much in the past couple of years, and this rush to commemorate and whitewash Charlie Kirk, someone as blatantly cruel and racist and bigoted as him, by so many people who just could have said nothing, has been a shocking reminder of just how racist so many people across the political spectrum still are. Like, how many people do we all know that are like Ezra Klein? A lot. And they aren't MAGA types. They aren't far right. How many people can we see making excuses for Plattner's Nazi tattoo? They aren't far right. It's just all sorts of red flags when I see that stuff. And whenever there's a shooting or a terrorist attack or some kind of crime, minorities do not have the luxury of being seen as individuals. They are immediately associated with the criminal, the shooter, the terrorist, and that incident is used to demonize entire communities. But cis-het white man shooters, Christian shooters, they do not get talked about like that. Their crimes do not get projected onto all cis-het white men. Everyone should have the luxury of not being blamed for a completely unrelated criminal's actions. These things are just so painfully visible nowadays, Here's what Kat Black had to say. Please listen with an open mind without being defensive, and if you're someone who is white and on the left and is vocally, visibly, consistently disgusted by what we see happening in the world today, know that she is not talking about you personally, but a more general trend.
I belong to a history of people who were enslaved, right? I don't think people understand. You don't have to go far back into my line to find slaves. It's not very far, right? But even though that's true, even though all of that's true, right, I still feel bad for judging white people for being racist. But then Charlie Kirk can loudly proclaim very clearly racist things. And we are bat over the head for calling it what it is, right? So what I think a lot of white people haven't fully calculated is that had you said nothing, had you done nothing, had you just said, you know what, I don't believe that anyone should die because of their political beliefs, but I disagreed with a lot of what he said, right? Had you said that, maybe the last part of that may have been too much. Had you just kind of not said anything and said, it's a tragedy, a lot of people would probably be able to entertain the premise that not all white people are racist. But for some people, and for some people, that is faded completely now. Completely. Because some people, and I saw some people have this experience, right? Some people had the experience of genuinely thinking that someone wasn't racist, only to find out that they listened to Charlie Kirk, supported what he said, agreed with a lot of what he said, believe that he's basically a Jesus-like figure. That's normative to a lot of white people, and the acknowledgement of that being normative to a lot of white people, I don't think a lot of white people understand how damning that is. For you to be able to casually listen to Charlie Kirk says a lot. It actually also says a lot if you can listen to a compilation of Charlie Kirk saying racist things. You don't think it's racist. It really does. It says more than I think they're really going to understand it's saying. And what I know for a fact is happening right now, there are people of color who are fully now in a position where they're not going to trust white people, where they understand now that trusting white people is probably going to get them killed. Because if you support what Charlie Kirk says, if you think that he deserves to be valorized and celebrated and all this other shit, if you really believe that, genuinely, you're a fucking racist.
Since so many who wish to soft pedal his image refuse to actually confront his views, let's do that now. It is very, very unpleasant and nasty stuff. It boggles my mind how many people don't understand the idea that, you can express condemnation of violence without completely lying about who Kirk was and without whitewashing his violently bigoted rhetoric. It's very possible to do that. That our liberal leaders and media figures were rushing to honor a person this toxic and vile is just hugely eye-opening. Okay, now let's hear Kirk in his own words to get a feel for what kind of guy he was. This hero of the right, the one they want statues of. Well, let's see. First, there were his despicably racist views.
I'm dealing with somebody in customer service who's a moronic black woman. I wonder, is she there because of her excellence? If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
Well, that's the
you wouldn't have done that. You wouldn't have done that before. That's not an immediate. No, you wouldn't have done that before. That's not who I am. That's not what I believe.
It is the reality the left has created.
There was the time he listed successful black women and said,
Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously. We know. It's very obvious to us that you were not smart enough to be able to get in on your own. I couldn't make it on my own, so I needed to take opportunities from someone more deserving. This is how arrogant Joy Reid and Ketanji Brown Jackson and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee are. They're so narcissistic, they think this is persuasive. They think we're like, oh, of course, that's why we need affirmative action, because you have impressed us with your brilliance. I'm only here because of anti-white, anti-Asian forced discrimination policies.
Just incredibly blatantly vile stuff, right? This is what Ilhan Omar is expected to sit and tolerate? Days of remembrance for this guy? This is what she's grilled on CNN for being rude about this guy? A lot of liberals, if they actually faced Kirk's views and discussions about him, they would perhaps not rush to celebrate him in the ways that we've seen over the past month or so, but they still do because they don't often confront the sort of person they are talking about while they're talking about him. And their racism becomes apparent in that very intentional decision to conveniently remove context from that conversation. But you know, there are people who are a lot more palatable in so-called liberal centrist circles who make very similar points to Charlie Kirk, but do so with a better vocabulary and slightly softer language. But tell me, how different are Kirk's racist talking points actually, in effect, to what a supposedly respectable intellectual like Sam Harris says? When he says things like, "Oh, I'm just asking questions, but how enthusiastic should you be to have a black brain surgeon if you know the MCATs for black doctors are a standard deviation lower?" As if they are just letting any unqualified person become a fucking brain surgeon, or as Kirk worries about, a pilot, just because of the color of their skin, and not because they have the required experience and qualifications, which for a fucking brain surgeon are absolutely not easy to attain. How different is it when Sam Harris pushes the, well, black people just have lower IQs than white people bullshit, but couches it in the language of science and rationality, all complete junk science, of course. I have a 3-part episode on race science, which I'll link in the show notes if you want to listen to just how flawed this stuff is. And how different is it when Sam Harris says stuff like, it is reasonable for women to wait for the next elevator if there's a specifically black, homeless-looking person in there who looks like he doesn't belong because it's a fancy building in a very wealthy and white part of town. It may be presented in the language of like a thought experiment and science or whatever, instead of Kirk's more upfront awfulness, but it's essentially the same level of deranged racism. And there are countless numbers of heterodox and IDW-adjacent characters like this who aren't recognized to be even remotely as racist as Charlie Kirk. It's perfectly acceptable to mention that you're a fan of theirs at a liberal dinner party, even in circles where it may not be acceptable to say the same about Kirk, despite them having so many of the same grievances and paranoid concerns. You know, it's just frustrating how common and everywhere this stuff is. How many forms it takes, and it's especially sickening when the form, as clear and open as Charlie Kirk's, is still not widely acknowledged, and any mention of that fact is suppressed instead. These were his views on Haitian migrants.
Just so you were clear, the Haitians that are in Huntsville that are raping your women and hunting you down at night, it's only going to get worse unless Donald Trump wins. And pray Trump wins, or else things are going to get really bad. They're going to get even worse. There will be hundreds of thousands of Haitians brought into Alabama, and they will become your masters.
And there's some more general unhinged racism.
Now, were they trying to hijack her? Were these blacks trying to go rob her? Happening all the time in urban America. Prowling blacks go around for fun to go target white people. That's a fact. It's happening more and more. Anytime you see an argument, anytime you see something between a white person and a black person, you have been trained, you have been conditioned to believe that it's the white person that is terrorizing the black person. And the psyop is really clear, that whites are the ones that are actually walking the streets terrorizing blacks. No, that's not true at all.
His views on MLK and civil rights.
What inspired Kirk to shift his view on MLK? Why does Kirk think that MLK is a bad guy? When Kirk says that MLK says, quote, one good thing he didn't believe, what does he mean by that? Why does Kirk believe passing the Civil Rights Act was a mistake? Now, again, apparently they don't listen to the show because we do that at least once a week, right? Once a week we talk about why the Civil Rights Act was a mistake.
Unfortunately, even one of MLK's sons felt the need to put out a sympathetic statement about Kirk. Why? He was just an influencer. Not everyone has to chime in on this, especially not MLK's son. I really don't get it. It's an especially odd move, given that he was specifically so awful about his father. Maybe it's one of these when they go low, we go high type of moves, but I don't think that's a great idea in the face of unrepentant fascism. And public figures, especially prominent ones associated with civil rights, putting out sympathetic words about Kirk really does help to legitimize him. I'm not sure what his politics are like generally, but this was very disappointing to see. There are even some vague parallels between Kirk and MLK being implied in this clip.
Martin Luther King III. Sir, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. I want to share with our viewers something that you posted online after Kirk's assassination. You said that your heart was heavy because his death was not only a tragedy for one man or one movement, it was a wound to the soul of our nation. And you added, "The time is now to lay down the weapons of rage and pick up the tools of peace."
We have to continue to encourage our society. Civility just in general in the political space is temporarily lost. Somehow we must reacquire that civility, and it should never, ever have gotten to the point where someone loses their lives because of words that they were saying. It is beyond off the rails. It is going in a direction that perhaps is not sustainable. My father used to say we must learn nonviolence or we may face non-existence, which would be terrible consequences.
No doubt. There was something also that you wrote that really struck me, because there are people out there, and we've covered these stories, who have expressed no sympathy for Charlie Kirk. There were people out there celebrating his murder, and yet you write about grieving him even as he at times had critical words about your own father. He reportedly went from years ago saying that your father was a hero and a civil rights icon to most recently saying that your father was awful and that he wanted to break the mythical sainthood of someone like MLK. I'm sure those comments don't land well with you, and yet you grieve this person. What's your message for those out there who don't feel empathy for Charlie Kirk?
Well, my message is that I have to first tune into my humanity. And this man, although I may have had disagreements with him on many things, he still is a human being. He was a husband and a father, which I can empathize with because I also am a husband and a father. So his wife and his two children would not have their loved one to go through life now. And I know that experience because I was 10 years old when my father was gunned down. So I have empathy first, and I would encourage everyone to consider that.
Later, though, he did clarify that he didn't approve of the obscene comparisons people were making between his father and Kirk, who hated his father and had the opposite message.
Martin Luther King Jr. is one of the significant figures in history that Charlie Kirk's influence is being equated to as a Turning Point USA founders' tributes pour in. And while many of Kirk's conservative supporters view him as a beacon of hope, Martin Luther King III says he has to respectfully disagree. Also pointing out instances of Kirk previously attacking what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stood for. While he admits Kirk has a right to his opinion, he says what he represented was quite different than his father, and that Dr. King was about, quote, bringing people together.
When you're doing that, it's a disservice to unification, and it doesn't mean you have to accept everything and agree with everything my dad said. I'm sure there are things that people in his own family, meaning Kirk, don't agree with. But that doesn't mean one denigrates the other, and so I guess I'm saying that. He certainly was a force in this society, a significant force. But I just disagree with the position that his force was about inclusiveness. when you denigrate black women and say that somebody's in a position just because of the color of their skin. That's gravely false. Every person that he talked about was beyond and eminently qualified.
I am glad he came out with some stronger and clearer words about what type of person Kirk was, but I think that legitimizing damage is already done, unfortunately. Anyway, let's continue listening to Kirk's own words.
When blacks in America did not have the same rights they had today, they were less murderous, there was less break-ins. Why is that?
So I'm sorry, are you trying to say that blacks thrive under subjugation?
No, I'm not. I'm asking you the question. The data shows they were actually better in the 1940s. It was bad, it was evil, but what happened? Something changed.
It's just disgusting. There's no context in which that is acceptable, let alone worth honoring or giving standing ovations to someone who speaks like that. The West has really gone mask off, hood on lately. I don't think I can even properly convey the sense of disappointment that I've felt the past couple of years. Let's listen to Charlie Kirk's very violent, abhorrent views on migrants in general.
At what point is it time to start to at least use rubber bullets or use some sort of tear gas to prevent this and quell this invasion? They have no regard for the process for legal immigration. And at what point do we use real force? You have to be willing to do it. Somebody asked me the other day, they said, Charlie, why are you so pro-Israel? One of the reasons I'm pro-Israel is that when Israel gets invaded on their border, they defend their border. If 300 Palestinian Arabs tried to run in Israel like that, it wouldn't end well for them. The most fundamental right of both property and sovereignty is the right to exclude. You don't own your home, your country, or even your body if you can't protect it from breach with deadly force. Again, Israel shoots people who rush the Gaza fence. And Democrats in America defend Israel. Some do, not all of them. Jewish Democrats like Chuck Schumer, and says, hey, Israel's defending itself, but why can't America defend itself the same way Israel defends itself? And understand, this is not about shooting people every day. If you do it once, maybe twice, when there is an actual invasion, people learn, and the threat of force is what keeps this sort of thing from happening. Not only should these people be deported, you need real deterrence. There is the castle doctrine in this country. The castle doctrine is that you're allowed to defend your home if it's being invaded, if it's being intruded upon, if it's being burglarized. Why can't you defend your country if it's being burglarized? These people are burglars, robbers, thieves, and criminals. They're effective squatters in the country, and we call them migrants. Stop using that term. And they laugh at us. You see that? They're kind of like rejoicing. They know we're never going to use force. The word is out in the insane asylums, in the prisons, in the gang communities. America is open. The greatest country ever to exist. They won't arrest you. They won't deter you. They won't deport you. They'll give you free stuff. And if you impregnate a woman, that child becomes a U.S. citizen because that's birthright citizenship.
This is, again, one of the major moral failings of the American church is on immigration. Even some churches are good on pro-life stuff. And I hear some of these pastors, and they're like, well, we should let them in with open arms. I said, what Bible are you reading? Now, it is true, you can misappropriate certain verses about loving the foreigner and loving the stranger. Nobody's talking about not loving. Deportation can be a very loving thing. Go back to your country of origin. If you're such a great dreamer, go back to Mexico and make Mexico great again. You're a criminal. You broke into our country. You weren't invited. You're squatting in America. Go on back to Mexico City.
Why do we have a military? Why do we have men with guns if we can't use them? Having a country means being able to draw a line on the ground and say, this is our sovereign territory. If you enter, we have lethal force and we're willing to use it.
We have lethal force and we're willing to use it.
Lethal force. You hear that? As an immigrant, you can't tell me that I should be honoring this person who made it his job to spew violence against people like me. I'm expected to sit and watch him be applauded and commemorated across the political spectrum, turned into a religious martyr. I'm expected to celebrate Jimmy Kimmel weeping for this guy from the supposed left. Like I said before, I don't think this kind of violence is okay, that this kind of violent rhetoric is okay. The left doesn't think that either. But Charlie Kirk thought it was perfectly fine and called for it often. He even said it was worth it to have some gun deaths every year.
We should have an honest and clear reductionist view of gun violence, but we should not have a utopian one. You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year, so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational.
Again, I wasn't saying that this was a price I was willing to pay. The left wasn't saying this. These were Kirk's own words. And just the irony. Please subscribe via patreon.com/nicemangoes for the extended episode. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support it, there are several ways you can do that. You can share it online, talk about what you just heard. You can leave a 5-star review to help others find it too. And you can also subscribe via patreon.com/nicemangoes. No E in mangoes. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter before it's completely wrecked, you'll find me at Nice Mangoes. Again, no E in mangoes.